In this video, I'm going to show you how to create this application in ASP.NET Core 8. So this is a CRUD application. If I go to customers here, I have a list of customers where I can add, edit, and delete customers. So if I go to create new, now let me see who don't I have here. Let's say Bob. So if I say here Bob, Stevens, and Bob Gmail, create, I get the message here. It's a flash message, so if I refresh I don't see it anymore. And here's Bob. I can edit and delete. There's also validation, so if let's say I don't have anything here and I want to edit, I get this error message. If I just type one letter, automatically I get another message, so there is both server-side and client-side validation. Let me just have here, let's say Bob Jr. Edit. Okay, customer edited successfully. Also, if I try to use an existing email such as John, it's not gonna work. Okay, and back to list, and finally I can delete as well. So if I just click delete, Bob is no more. Okay, so this is a great project if you're new. I'm going to cover how to use Entity Framework, migration, so creating tables, seeding, validation, partial views, and much more as a whole. So like and subscribe, and let's get to it. Here I am in Visual Studio 2022, and I'm going to go here to create a new project. Search up here for MVC. Okay, so this one. I'm going to call the project CRUD, and next, and these are fine. So .NET 8, no authentication, configure for HTTPS. Okay, create, and there we go. Okay. If you are brand new to ASP.NET Core, I suggest you watch my other video called Create Your First Project in ASP.NET Core 8, because I'm not going to explain the same stuff here, just the pure basics. Okay, so anyway, let's continue. I'm going to create a model. So in the models folder, I'm going to right click and go to add class and call this class customer. Okay, so we're actually going to create a table based on this class and use this class to deal with the data concerning the table. Okay, so here I'm going to say prop double tab int, and I'm going to call this ID, and this will be a string, first name, and control D this twice, so this is going to be a last name and email. Okay, and we can call this ID anything. It can be, for example, customer ID, but if you call it ID as you should, then Entity Framework will know automatically that you want this to be the primary key. Okay, you can also specify that, but by saying key here like so, adding that attribute. But again, it's not necessary if you just call it ID. Okay, so I'm just going to leave it as that and just make this nullable like so to get rid of that warning, which you can also disable, by the way, by going to right click in the project and going to the project file here. Okay, so nullable, if I set that to disable, and then if I don't have that question mark there, you can see it's fine, and I get actually here green squiggles now, but I'm just gonna leave it as enabled because it's enabled by default, so I'll just have it like that. Okay, and the next thing to do is to install some packages. So before that, let's right click the project and open the project file just so we can see it. I'm just going to Control KD here to format it because I prefer to have 4 spaces. Okay, so now I'm gonna go to Tools and NuGet Package Manager, manage NuGet packages for solution, and browse. And here I'm gonna search for core. I want this Microsoft Entity Framework core. Okay. Let me just select the project here and install. Accept. Okay, that should have worked. And if I check my project file now, right here, you can see that I have this item group with the package reference. Okay, let's continue. We need two more. I'm gonna search for core SQL here, and this one, EF Core SQL Server. So install that as well. Accept. Okay, and notice here in the project file, now we have that as well. Okay, and finally we need one more. We need core tools. So just search for that, and this one right here, EF Core Tools. Okay, so we actually need all three. And there we go. Now if we check the project file, we should have this. Okay, and let's now create the database, which actually involves a few steps. So I'm just going to close this project file here, don't need it. Okay, so first of all, I want to set the connection string. So I'm going to go to app settings, and after this allowed hosts here, I'm going to say connection strings, and I get some help there. Okay, create an object, and I'm going to call this default connection like so, and you can call this anything you want. And in here, I'm just going to paste because it's a chore to write, and you can get this from GitHub, from the project files in GitHub. So I'm just going to paste. Okay, so server equals, and you specify the server. Then we just need to put in the database here because this is empty, and you need this trusted connection true and trust server certificate true. Okay, so the first thing I want to say is that I'm using local DB. So this is my server. If you want to use SQL Server with its management studio, if you have that installed on your computer and you want to use it, then you can just have the dot here, and that's for that. But if you want to use local DB, which is what I want to use, then you should have this. And the database can be anything. I'm just going to call it CRUD. Okay, so that's that. And one thing I didn't mention in my other for beginners core for beginners video, in this app settings, if you expand this, there's this app settings development. Okay, so you can overwrite stuff from app settings in here, which will be used in development only. And you can also create another one called production instead of development, and then use that for production. Okay, but this is a simple application. This is all we need. We don't need to overwrite anything. So this is fine. Let's move on. In models again, I'm gonna add another class, and I'm gonna call this application DB context. Okay, so we need this class to actually communicate with the database and create tables and so on. So first of all, this is going to implement DB context. Okay, as you can see from Microsoft EF Core right here. And after that, we need to have a constructor. So ctor, and in here I'll say DB context options and application DB context options and base options. Okay, so the constructor is actually going to be empty. We just need to have this for it to work. And now we need to register this. So whenever we need to register something, we do that in the program CS file. And right here in services. Okay, so after this line here, I'm going to say builder services, add DB context, okay? And application DB context it is. Okay. And then in here, pass the options, fat arrow, and say options use SQL Server, and pass here the connection string. So builder configuration get connection string, and then whatever we called it. Okay, so let me go here, and it's this default connection. So just paste that in here, semicolon there, Control KD to format everything if needed, and that should do it. And the final step is to run a command. So here in Package Manager console, and if you don't see that, go to Tools, NuGet Package Manager console, okay? And here I'm gonna write update-database. So if I just type the beginning tab, I get the help here, so update database. Okay, so it seems to have worked. To check, I'm gonna go here to SQL Server Object Explorer, and if you don't see that, go to View and right here, okay, local DB here, databases, and there's CRUD, okay. No tables for now, because we actually need to create migrations to create tables, but we do have the database, which means everything is working fine, okay. Let's now create a table based on our customer model. So for that, here in application DB context, I am going to say prop and DB set. Okay, and here pass the model as the type, so customer. And now this is what the table will be called. So customers, I'll say plural. And that's actually it. This is all we need to create a table. Now we just need to run some commands. So in Package Manager console again, I'm going to type add tab, and I want add migration, which I don't actually see, so let me just type this as well, okay? And now the name of the migration, which can be anything. I'll just call it add customer table, okay? And there we go. So now we get this migration folder, which we didn't have before. In here we have the snapshot, but more importantly, we have this add customers table CS with a timestamp. And if we open that, we can see our table in here, okay? So ID, for example, type int, null, false, first name, string, and so on. And we can see here that it's actually, it has set the ID to be the primary key, okay? And to actually create a table based on this migration now, I'm going to say again, update database. Okay, and there we go. So if I go to SQL Server here, Object Explorer, tables, and let's refresh, right click refresh, and there we go. We have the customers table now, okay? And let's now create our customer controller. So right click controllers, add controller, empty, and I'll call this customer controller. Okay, so what we have right here now is fine. We just have the index, which returns a view, and this view name, because we're not specifying anything here, it should have the same name as the method, right? As we should know from my other video, unless you know this already. So anyway, to create this, we can go here to views and create a folder with the name of the controller, so customer in this case, and then create a view. But actually we can also just right click and go to add view, okay? I'll choose empty for now and call it index, that's fine. So razor view empty, index, add, and there we go. We get a folder with the correct name and the view, okay? In the view, I'm gonna just have an h1 for now and say here customer list, like so. And I also want to add this link to customers in my main navigation. So if let me just actually control F5 to start without debugging. Okay, so we have this, and if I go to /customer/index, I get my view here, but I want to have the link here. So to do that, let me close this. I am going to go to views and shared and layout. So the main layout, Control KD to format this if needed. And right here, I'm going to take this link, Control D it to duplicate, and call this customers. And let's get rid of this ASP area. We don't need that. So just like so. And change the controller for customer, so the controller is customer. And that should do it. So let's control F5 again. And there we go. Now we have customers here. So if I go to the home page and then to customers, it works. Okay, great. Let's now see the customers table. So I'm going to go to application DB context right here. And after this line, I'm going to say protected, override, void, and I want on a model creating. So I get help here. I'm just going to tab. So this is what I want. On a model creating and pass the model builder here. Okay, get rid of this. And I want this exactly. So I'm just going to tab. So model builder entity and customer. And I'm going to change to this has data. Okay. And in this has data, just have a semicolon there. I'm going to say new customer and pass ID. So ID 1, first name, it's going to be John, last name Jones, and email john@gmail.com. Okay, let's Control D this twice. Change the IDs, so 2 and 3. Get rid of that comma there. So this is gonna be Mary Jones and Mary Gmail and Jack Smith, I guess, and Jack Gmail. Okay, great. Of course, you can have whatever you want. I'm just going to have 3 records, that's enough. And now we need to create the migration again, okay, to actually see this. So here in the package manager console, again, I'm going to say add-m tab, add migration, and call it something. So seed customer table, I'll call it, okay. And again, we get this file. So in migrations, there it is. It opened automatically, like before, for the creation of the table right here. Okay. So anyway, here we get all the migration thingies to actually be able to see the table. So here are the values right here, columns and the table. Okay. And again, to apply this, we need to update the database. So again, update database, and that should have worked. So let's see if I go here, customers, right click, view data, and there we go. There's our data. Okay, great. And let's now display that list of customers on our page. So to do that, here in the customer controller, I'm going to add to the constructor right here, application DB context, and call that DB. And then here I'm gonna have a private read-only application DB context underscore DB equal to DB. Okay. And with entity framework, getting the data is very easy. So here in index, I'm going to have a list of customers and call this customers, and that's going to be equal to underscore DB customers and to list. Okay. And pass those customers to the view like so. Okay, so this looks good. Now we need to go to the view, and instead of clicking here, I can just right click and say go to view. Okay, inside the method. And now here, before this h1, I need to specify the model, right? So add model, and that's gonna be a list of customers, like so. And then I'm gonna have a table. And since Bootstrap is automatically included, I can just use its classes. So I'm gonna give it a class of table and table bordered, like so. And here I'm gonna have a t head and a tr and ID, and control did this a few times. So we need the ID, the first name, last name, and email. Okay, and then have the t body here. And now here we want to loop through the list of customers, right? So I'm gonna say add and for each, so add for the razor syntax, tab. So for each var c in model, capital M, I'm gonna have a tr and a td, add cid and control D this a few times, and first name, control W to select the word, last name, and email. Okay, so let's control F5 this and see if it works. And there we go, we get our list. Okay, let's have this list displayed the other way around, so latest first. And because this is just a list now, we can use link here. And by the way, the server is still running because I control F5'd it instead of just running with debugging. So without debugging, it's gonna keep on running and use this hot reload. Okay, so it usually works. Sometimes it doesn't work, but let's hope it does now. For some changes it works, but for other changes you actually need to restart again. But let's try and see what happens. So I'm gonna add here order by, that is, and x fat arrow, xid, and reverse. Okay, and close the parenthesis there, and let's see. And there we go, it refreshed automatically, it worked, and now we get Jack first, and so on. Okay, great. Now let's now do create. So I'm gonna control D this index and call it create, get rid of that, so it's just gonna return a view. And let's create that view. I'm gonna say right click, add view, but this time I'm gonna use razor view instead of empty. Okay, so let's see what happens. Okay, so here I have the view name, which is create, and because I will enlarge the font for the video, some things are a bit messed up, but this says create here. And the template, as you can see, we can choose here. I'm gonna choose create. Okay, and the model, which will be customer, and DB context class, application DB context. And here uncheck create as partial view. I don't need to reference script libraries, but I do want to use the layout page, the default one. Okay, let's click add and see what we get. And here it is, guys. We get the whole form just by clicking a few times. Okay, so let me just clean this up a bit and then go through it. So first of all, we don't need the full name here. We can just have customer here. I'm not gonna be using the title now, and this view data title, that's in, I'm not gonna use it, but I just want to show you in layout. Let's see, title, where is it? Right here. Okay, so anyway, I'll get rid of that. I'll say here create customer, get rid of that h1 and HR as well. And so let's see what we have here. First of all, we have the form with SP action create, which means because this method is called create, it will automatically be a post request, and it will expect that method to be called create as well. Okay, and then we have this validation summary, which we'll get into later on. but you should know this from my previous video if you don't already. And this here is new, but I'll get to it. And here we have the label for first name and the input for first name, and same for last name and email, and finally the submit button here. And we have back to list here, just a link. And let me just change this part here a bit. I will copy this A and just have it here. Actually, I'm gonna cut it from here, like so. And let me just give this a few classes. Say BTN and BTN dark. And it just says index here for the action. The controller isn't specified because it will assume it's the controller for this view, where this view is basically coming from already, right? Which is the customer controller. So we don't need to specify that. We can if we want, or even specify some other one, of course. But if you just want to use the default one, you don't need to specify it. So I'm just gonna leave it like this. And let's Control F5 this and see what we have. Okay, so if I go to /customer/create now, I get this, okay, which is really good because we didn't do anything. We just clicked twice. Okay, let me just style this a bit. I'm gonna get rid of this form group here and say empty-3, so margin top. Let's see, and I Control F5, so it's still running. But even if you start with debugging, this HTML stuff should work, I believe, with hot reload. But usually, if I don't want to use breakpoints, I just start without debugging always and push it as far as I can before I have to restart. Okay. This is really small. Let me see what's happening here. I'm just gonna have this here as call 6. And we don't even need the row. This is too much HTML here. Control KD. Get rid of that space. Let's see what we have. Okay, this is looking nicer. And it's all good except for these labels. So because we're using ASP4 here for labels, we get the property name, right? Which is first name with no space, of course. But I mean, you don't really need to use ASP4 for labels. You can just simply not use it. But if you do want to use it, and there is one benefit to using it, which is, if that's even a benefit, now because I'm using ASP4 for labels, if I click the label, this input is going to get highlighted. Okay, so if that's a benefit, even that's what you get. So anyway, for these here, I'm not going to use it. So let me get rid of ASP4 there and say here last name, and for email as well, get rid of ASP4 and email. So let's see, now I get that, and the clicking doesn't work anymore, which for me is fine. But for the first name, I'm gonna actually go to the customer model, okay, and just show you how you can change that display. So for first name here, I'm gonna say display name, okay, and then say here first space name. So let's see, and there we go, it auto refreshed, and you can do it like that, so whichever way you prefer. Let me just right click and inspect this and just show you the form here. So you can see that the method is post, even though we didn't specify that, and it points to /customer/creator, which is correct. Okay, so it's doing all these things automatically. That's the power of ASP. Okay, let's now do server-side validation before we actually create the post method. So here in the customer model, for this first name, I'm going to add some attributes. So I'm going to say required, okay, and it imports the necessary statements here. And I'm going to say comma min length and say 2, Okay, and copy and paste that for last name as well. So here actually, and for email I'm gonna say required and email address. Okay, so it's gonna do some basic checking to check if it's an email. And let's now create the post method. So in the custom controller, let me control D this one. And now I need to say it's post because by default it's get, right? So to make this a post method, I'm going to say HTTP post here as the attribute. And I'm going to pass the customer here. So same name as the get version, but it's a post and accepts a customer, right? And now here, before I do anything, I want to check if the model state is valid, if validation passed, okay? So I'm gonna say if model state is valid, like so, Control key D to format this, then it's fine, I can add the customer. So I'm gonna say _db customers add customer. And db save changes. Okay, Control key D to format, and then I'll say return redirect to action, and the action name is index with the capital I. Okay, so this will assume that we are talking about the same controller, but if you want to redirect to another controller, you can specify that here. So some other controller here, okay, but I don't want to go to this index method, so I don't need to. It's implied. So that's if, and that should be actually in here. So that's if it is valid, and if it's not valid, then I'm gonna just return the view, which will an empty view, which will also return the error messages, okay? So let's see. Control F5, I need to restart. And let me just refresh here to make sure it's working. It is. So if I just go create here and I get the messages down here. Okay, so first of all, why am I getting these messages? Let's go to the create form. Does these spans here? So actually ASP validation 4 and whatever the property name is. Okay, so that's those individual validations. That's why I'm getting it like so. And let's say if I put just one letter here, create, I get this message now. Okay, it must be minimum length of 2 basically, right? So that all works, but let's change the messages. So in customer model here for min length, I'm gonna say after 2 error message, okay, and just add the message that I want. So first name is too short, and let me copy this whole thing and comma paste that here, edit code. Last name is too short, save that, and let's see if this actually applied. I'm not sure it did, so if I let me go to /create again, okay, and just one letter, and I need to actually restart, so Control F5 again, and this is what I meant. It depends on what you do. Sometimes it works, other times it doesn't. Okay, now it says first name is too short. Okay, great. And for this create, last name is too short. Okay, great. But let's actually add a user. So I'm gonna say here, actually we have John Bob, Bob Stevens, Bob at Gmail, and create. And there we go, we get Bob here. Okay, let's just add a link here to create a customer. So in index here, I'm gonna have a row here and a call with this h1 and Control D dot, and here I'm gonna have an A, sp action create, and a few classes, btn, I'm not getting help for some reason, btn primary, and say create new customer here. Okay, Control KD this to format. Let's just paste this out a bit so it's tidier. And let's see, here it is, so create new customer, and there we go, and back to list, it all works. So once again, we don't need to specify the controller here, even though we can. So controller, okay, because we want to be inside of the same controller. So ASP will know to point to the controller we are in right now, okay? Okay, so far so good. Notice here in create, we have this ASP validation summary, right? And it says model only. And we can actually have here model only, and we can have all, and we can have none, which is actually none. So what's the difference between model only and all? If I have all here, and let me start again the server, go to create new customer. If I click create now, you can see I get the messages here as well, okay? So these ones I'm getting because of these spans here with ASP validation 4, but these ones are coming from this div right here, okay? So if it's all, you just get everything. But if it's model only, then you get only the ones that have nothing to do with properties. That's why I don't get anything now, okay? I'll show you what I mean. So if I here in the post, if I just add an error or make the model invalid, that is. So I'm gonna say here model state, add model error. And I'm not gonna pass anything here for the key basically, which should be the property name if that's something you're doing, which I'll do in a bit, but for now I don't want to. And I'm just gonna have a message here and just say no go, okay? So we are gonna have an error in our model whatever we do, right? Because we're just saying that here. So let's see now, and you can see it refreshed with no go automatically, okay? So even if I fill this out, it's not gonna work, create, but it's not gonna pass validation because we have this error message. And it's displaying because, let's see, we have model only here, and this error has nothing to do with properties, okay? Now let me get rid of that actually and add some custom validation. And let me before that just have this as none, which just means none. Okay, so if I go to create and create, I simply will not have anything there. So I'm just going to have that as none. I don't want to see it, but for the custom validation, what I want to check for is that the email doesn't already exist. Okay, so I'm gonna say here if db customers any c fat arrow c email equals customer email, just stop the server like so. So if that's the case, we're gonna have an error. So I'm gonna say model state add model error, and I'm gonna say email here because I want this to be connected to the email property, okay? So if I have that name here, then it's gonna display in the span error. And I'm gonna say here email is already taken, okay? And we have a squiggly here, email may not be null here, so just to get rid of that, I'm gonna have an exclamation mark here because I know it will never be null. So this is fine. Okay, and let's see if this actually works. So let's see who we have here. First of all, go to actually start the server. Okay, so go to customers. We have John twice for some reason. Let me get rid of John. So view data and get rid of John, like so. Okay. And let's create a new customer. So let's say Steve Stevens, whoops, and email john@gmail.com. Create, and email is already taken. Okay, it's not going to work, so that's great. So let's say steve@gmail.com, create, and that works. Okay, great. And finally, let's add client-side validation, which is very important. So right now, we are checking everything server-side, right? So to check in the client, when we create the MVC application, we get this validation scripts partial here, okay, which includes this jQuery validation. And we're going to use partial views in a bit, but let's just add this view as a partial view, which just means it's a part of a page, not the whole page. Okay, so in create here, down here, I'm gonna say add section scripts, and because I don't want to actually include scripts such as JavaScript, I want to use C# here or C# HTML. I'm gonna say add and curly braces and partial name, and let me click this and F to it just so I get the name right. So paste that like so. Okay. Control key D to format this. So what is the scripts section? I'm not gonna get into sections too much, but they are very simple. So I'm calling the scripts. Why? Because in layout, I have that section defined automatically. Okay, here it is, this line right here. So render section async scripts, okay? And it's not required. Of course, you can create a section with a different name if you want, but this one exists already, so why not use it for this particular purpose? So anyway, in here, that should actually do it, okay? And if I start the server again, so Control F5, let's see what happens now. Create new customer, and if I click create, I get the same messages, but notice here, it doesn't hit the server. This never reloads, so pay attention again. Create, but it doesn't reload, okay? And if this goes through, but let's just do it. So John and Jones and John Gmail, so this exists, right? Also notice that as I'm typing, I get the error messages because it's client side. So first name is required. If I just type one letter, first name is too short, okay? So now it's all good, but client side isn't able to check our custom validation, right? It cannot check if email is unique without actually contacting the database. So now, because all this is correct, when I click create, it will actually do the custom validation server side. So it's gonna hit this, pay attention, okay? You saw that it did hit it, and email is already taken, but this is of course server side validation. But all this we get client side, okay? Let's now handle edit and delete. So first of all, let's go to index and add those links here, okay? So have a TD here, and then A, get rid of the href. We want to use ASP stuff. So ASP action is gonna be edit, and this will say edit, and add some classes. So btn-dark. But because this is edit, we need to pass the ID as well, right? So we're editing what? Which record exactly? Which row that is? So to pass the ID, I'm going to say here ASP route and then dash something, which will be ID in this case. I'll call it ID and at CID. Okay. And let me just bring this down so it's a bit easier to see. So something like this. And let me also Control D this for delete. So the same thing kind of, we're just changing the action to delete, still passing the ID, and this will be delete. But I'm actually gonna change this to danger. Control F5, let's see. Customers, and there we go, edit and delete. And notice in the bottom left that we're pointing to customer /edit/ID and /delete/ID. Okay, so it's all working fine so far. I'm gonna close the server, and now in the customer controller I am going to paste this create get and post. So copy, whoops, and not copy, I meant to do Control D actually. So Control D, and this will be edit. And so here I want to get that ID that I'm passing, right? So int question mark and ID. So here, let me check that it actually exists. So I'm gonna say customer is equal to db customers, and this will be just find. Okay, so find the ID. Let's make this nullable. And now I just want to do some basic checks. So if ID is null or ID is 0 or customer is null, I'm going to return not found. Okay. Otherwise, I'm going to return the view with the customer, like so. And this post method will be edit as well. And we are passing the customer. So here we are doing the same thing basically as create. The only difference is that we don't want to check if this email is the same for this particular person, right? Because obviously it will be the same. So I'm going to add here and CID isn't equal to customer ID. Okay, Control KD data format. So this looks good. I'm going to create a view and I'm just going to create an empty view. So right click, add view, empty, call it edit, because I can just copy from create. Okay, so just copy and paste, and it's basically the same thing. This is just going to say edit customer and the action will be edit. Okay. And let's see if this works. So Control F5 actually, and Steve, so edit, and you can see by passing the model right here and using ASP4s, we get everything filled out automatically. And if let's say here that is Steve Jr. and actually this should say edit. So let's just change that. Okay, so Steve Jr., Stevens, edit, and of course let me close the server, and this should be update, of course, not add. Okay, let's try this again. It refreshed and it worked actually automatically. I don't need to type everything again. So now we have Steve Jr. and if I go to edit and let's get rid of Jr. here, edit, and it's fine. Okay, great. Let's also do delete because it's pretty simple. Let's see here. I am going to copy this edit, get edit. And as I said, these are get by default, but if you want to be specific, you can say here HTTP get, but they are get by default, so it's not necessary. Okay, so anyway, not that, but the method, copy and paste it down here, and change this to delete. And let me actually copy from here. So if the ID is found, I am going to say here remove and return redirect to action index. Okay, let's see if that actually works now. So this refreshed automatically because I still have the server running. And if we try to delete Steve, and there we go, Steve is no more. Okay, great. The final thing I want to do is to add a message to the index view when we create, edit, or delete a customer. Okay, so to do that, I can use TempData. Let's see. So in post edit, if this worked, I'm going to say here TempData. Okay, and it needs a key here. I'll call this success. And then have a message here. So customer created successfully. And let me copy this line. And where are we actually? This is edit. So this is edited. Let's go to post create. Paste that here. So created and delete as well. Before the return, so customer deleted successfully. Okay, and now to actually display this, I am going to go to the index view, and up here I'm gonna say at if temp data success isn't null, then I'm going to have an h2, let's say, and display the message. So at TempData success. Okay, and that should actually do it. So Control F5, let's see. If I go to edit and just click edit, we get the message right here. Okay, so great, that works. And let's delete Bob, for example. Delete, customer deleted successfully. Okay, great. So this does work, but we can make it better by using partial views. So let's do that. I'm gonna close the server, and partial views go into this shared folder where we already have this validation scripts partial. So again, there's nothing special about them. They're simply used as parts of a page. Okay. So I am going to, let me just copy paste this one here and call it underscore notifications partial. And you can call them anything. There's no anything works, but this is just, oops, I renamed the original. Let me just get rid of this copy here. Okay. But this is the standard. Okay, so notifications, underscore notifications partial. And now I'm going to take this, cut it, and paste it here. Okay, but also I want to have this in an alert, so with some bootstrap classes. So div alert dash success, and it's not working because I'm in Razor, I guess. So let me just do this and do it again. So alert success, and have this in here. This can be an h4 class alert heading. Okay, and now to include this, we can add this partial view here. So first of all, it's less code as it is. And the second thing is, imagine we had an error here as well. So I'm going to control this and say here error. So we don't have this, but imagine we did. Then this would be, I guess, danger and error here. Okay, so then we would have to have this. Let me copy and paste it here. Okay, so we would just be cluttering up space. And of course, if we had this in multiple files, we would need to change each and every file if we wanted to make a change. but like this, we just use this partial view notifications and render that here. So to render it, I'm going to say here partial name, and let me F2 the name so I don't mess it up. Okay, and that should do it. So this should do the exact same thing, but with much better code. F5, and let's see. Okay, so edit, and there we go. And the thing I didn't mention, I believe, is because this is TempData, meaning temporary data. It's basically like flash messages, so it's only visible for the next request. Okay, so if I refresh now, I'm not gonna see it. That's the point of it. Okay, that's gonna be it for this video. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.